And we are back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast. And for the final part of the show, we are now going to do a season overview on the Atlanta Falcons and what they have to do to improve for 2025. So, the biggest thing going into the season was the fact that they signed Kirk Cousins, gave him a $180 million contract, with $100 million guaranteed, a 4-year contract. And then they went and drafted Michael Penix with their, I think it was the 9th pick in the draft. And they were widely criticized for it. Now, the Falcons, they started off the year good. They were in first place. They swept the season series with the Buccaneers, and that was really the team that they were competing with because, the Saints fell off and the Panthers were not good until they picked things up, and then they beat the Falcons to give them no chance of making the playoffs. But they did get off to a good start. But, and Kirk Cousins was inconsistent. And he also, was coming off of a major injury. And he had some good games, mainly against the Buccaneers. If you take out those 2 games against the Buccaneers, his stats are even worse than what they are. He finished with 18 touchdowns and 16 picks. Now, he didn't play the last, quarter of the season, basically, because he ended up getting benched. But like I said, you take out those 2 Buccaneers games, and his season was even worse. He threw for 500 yards in one game. I thought, you go back to week 2, because also he had that game-winning drive against the Eagles when Saquon dropped the 3rd down and the Eagles, kicked the field goal. And, then the Falcons went the length of the field. Or, no, did they kick a field goal? Either way, Falcons went the length of the field, scored a touchdown. They ended up winning by a point. And then you had the game where Kirk Cousins threw for 500 yards against the Bucs, and you're like, all right, Kirk is back. But then all of a sudden, things just went on a downward spiral from there. Now, he did say in a recent interview that, he hurt his shoulder against the Saints, because the Saints ended up upsetting the Falcons later in the season, and that might have caused Kirk Cousins' play to fall off, because like I said, they were 6-3 before that loss to the Saints. Things were looking good for them. They came off of a win against the Cowboys, although even before that, though, I'm looking back at their games. You ended up losing to the Seahawks by 3 scores, and Kirk Cousins threw a couple of picks in that game. I think he also lost a fumble in that game. Yeah, he did. So he turned the ball over 3 times. But so I was still waiting for that consistency even before, that Saints game. But then, they go to New Orleans. They play against the Saints. They still had an opportunity to win that game. Sorry, I didn't realize my camera turned off. But they end up losing. And then they got blown out by the Broncos, 38-6. Then there was a bye week. Then they came back against the Chargers, and Kirk threw 4 picks in the game. 4 picks, and some of them were really bad. I don't have to go through it because I say the same thing every time I talk about him. Then they got blown out by the Vikings, and then a win against the Raiders. They went 15-9, and he threw for 112 yards. He went 11-17, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. And he did have a fumble, but he didn't lose it. And the Falcons, they ran the ball 37 times. So they relied on their running game and their defense also came up big because also Desmond Ridder played. So they should have won that, and they did. But then they said, you know what? We're going to put in Michael Penix. And Michael Penix, in the 3 games that he played, 3 touchdowns to 3 picks. He had 775 passing yards. And he did flash some potential there. And I really am curious to see what he's going to do over a full season now as a starter. Because now, as of right now, you have Kirk Cousins making all this money, and he's going to be the backup. but Penix in the 3 games that the 3 full games that he did play in against the Giants, he only threw for 200 yards. He didn't have a touchdown. He had an interception in the game. But the Falcons blew them out. I mean, I think they had 2 pick-sixes in the game off of Drew Lock. It was never really close. Washington, he had that 4th-down conversion to Kyle Pitts for the touchdown to send it in overtime. Went 19 to 35 for 223 yards, a touchdown and a pick. And then, I guess his best game was against the Panthers. He had 312 yards, 2 touchdowns and a pick. Went 21 to 38. But you did see the Falcons looked like a different offense when they made the change. And Bijan Robinson put together a very good season. He had 1,456 rushing yards and 14 touchdowns. Stud running back, one of the best running backs in the league. Drake London had his best season. He had 9 touchdowns. He had 100 receptions. He had 1,271 receiving yards. Darnell Mooney was productive for them. He had almost 1,000 yards. He had 5 touchdowns. Kyle Pitts had 4 touchdowns, only 602 receiving yards. They're looking for him to maybe break out next year, but I feel like we've been saying that every single year with Kyle Pitts. At some point, when is it going to happen? And I don't think Kyle Pitts is a bad player, but I don't think he's what many people thought he was going to be. Now, when it comes to what the Falcons got to do this offseason, I think defense is one area that needs to be addressed. I think the front 7 definitely needs some work. The Falcons' defense was not very good last year. It was kind of, I wouldn't say it was like awful, but I feel like it was kind of like a middle of the pack defense. I think they need to add to that front 7, like I said. Quarterback, they're fine for now, unless, they find out Penix isn't the guy, but we'll see. Running back, they're fine. I think maybe you could add another pass catcher. Maybe they add another receiver. Ray McCloud was their number 3 receiver. And then they also had Cordero Hodge. I think you could add another playmaker. Maybe offensive line. Although I was looking at their cap space. They don't really have a lot of cap space, the Falcons. They got to restructure some contracts. Because I was looking at it, and I went to overthecap.com, which is what everybody probably does. But the Falcons right now, they have, I don't know if it's, well, actually, they might be $5 million over the cap. But yeah, you got Kirk Cousins making a lot of money. His cap number's $40 million. Then you got Jesse Bates in the secondary. He's making $22 million. Chris Lindstrom on the offensive line is making $22 million. Jake Matthews is making $21 million. Grady Jarrett, $20 million. A.J. Terrell, $19 million. David Onyemata is $16 million. Darnell Mooney's making $14 million. There's a lot of guys making big money on this team. So I think they're either, they're going to have to cut some guys maybe, or, we'll see if they cut Kirk Cousins. Or they restructure some guys. But, yeah, the biggest thing is, are they going to cut Kirk Cousins? Now, they keep saying they're going to make him as a backup. Now, I know I did my segment earlier, or at the beginning of the show, with the top free agent quarterbacks and where they could end up. And Kirk Cousins was not included because right now Kirk Cousins is not a free agent. But if Kirk Cousins becomes a free agent, there's going to be a lot of teams that would want to sign him because there's a lot of teams desperate for quarterbacks. That would change a lot of things. Because the Jets could be a possibility. Although right now they're saying they'd be comfortable going into the year with Tyrod Taylor, which I like Tyrod as a backup. But as a full-time starter in 2025, I would, as a Jet fan, I'd be like, really? But I don't think there's going to be more than just him on the team. So, but yeah, Kirk Cousins, we'll see if he ends up getting cut. But yeah, if I'm Kirk Cousins, do I really want to be a backup? I want to start. So I think one way or another, Kirk Cousins is going to find his way out of Atlanta. But yeah, I would not have given Kirk Cousins that contract. If I was, now, I shouldn't say that. I would have either done one or the other. You either draft Michael Penix, and then you bring in like another, veteran quarterback on a cheap deal, or you sign Kirk Cousins to that 4-year contract and you commit to him for the 4 years. Now, the way the season went, yeah, that would have been awful. The way, and you wouldn't have gone to Penix. And who knows how the Falcons probably would have, you know, they probably wouldn't have won a single game. Well, actually, no, they probably still beat the Giants. Actually, yeah, never mind. Forget what I said. They probably still end up finishing with the same record. Because after they benched Kirk Cousins, they beat the Giants. They lost to the Commanders. And then, did they lose to the Panthers? I mean, I guess they probably still lose to the Panthers the way Kirk was playing. But, yeah, so they probably still finish 8-9. Never mind. But it was very disappointing how they finished off the year. Because you were like, wow, this team might end up, making the playoffs. Kirk's first year, this is looking good. And then his play just fell off. Now, we look at the Falcons' draft situation. So, they currently hold the 8th overall pick in the draft. And then you go on down the list here. So, they have the 3rd pick in the 2nd round. And they got that from the Cardinals. Then they have, I think that might have been was that the the Rondell Moore trade? Might have been. Because you forgot about that because he ended up not playing. Then they have the 10th pick in the 3rd round, the 9th pick in the 4th round, the 8th pick in the 5th round, the 10th pick in the 6th round. They got that from the Vikings through the Cardinals. And then they got 2 6th-round picks. One of them they got from the Browns. So they got 8 picks. I think front 7, offensive line, and you throw in a receiver. I think that's what they're going to do. Now, with the first pick, it's interesting. I think with the first pick, I think they'll go with someone defensively. And then maybe in the 2nd round, they go and they draft a receiver. Maybe. But we'll see. Look, this is a very winnable division. It's going to be better next year. Because I think the Panthers are going to be better. The Saints, might be the last place team with how everything's going. And then you got the Bucs. I think the top 2 teams are still the Bucs and the Falcons. And we'll see, how Michael Penix is, like I said, over the course of a full season. Now, I did have the Falcons winning the division. I had them going 10-7. I ended up being incorrect. But that's where we're at right now with them. But let me know what you guys think, though, about the Falcons season. How do you see Michael Penix doing next year? We'll find out, how the Falcons can rework their cap situation. And, see what they do in the draft. So that is pretty much it with the show for today. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure to check out all the other shows as well. Make sure to subscribe to both YouTube channels. Make sure to leave a like and a comment on our videos as well. We greatly appreciate it. And until next time, I'm Kenneth Grunfelder signing off from the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Have a good day, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Take care.